Welcome everyone to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter, and I am a curator here in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. SIMS is a research and development institute focused on manuscripts, and among many other things, we actually have collections of manuscripts that we have access to, which is fantastic. And so once a week, I get on Zoom and show one or sometimes more of the manuscripts from our collection. Today, we're going to be looking at MS Codex 1677, which is an 18th century occult manuscript, which seems, we don't have a whole lot of like Halloween-y kind of thing, so I thought bringing out a manuscript from this particular collection might be fun. If you're on Zoom, if you're on the video, you don't see this, but if you're on Zoom, don't touch that because you're making the camera move. If you saw the camera vibrating, that's because I have my son is here with me today. If you were here in April for Bring Your Child to Work Day, you are familiar with him. We're going to have lunch today, so he came a little early to join us. So hello.
Hello.
All right. So MS Codex 1677. I'm going to give you a history lesson first. So this manuscript is one of a collection that we purchased, which is pretty unusual to be able to buy a whole collection of books. If you want to find out more than I'm going to tell you right now, there is this blog post that my colleague Mitch Frost wrote when it was purchased. But essentially, this collection, it's the Charles Rainsford collection of occult manuscripts, occult and alchemical manuscripts. So Charles Rainsford lived. He was born in 1729 and he died in 1809. He was a British Army officer, a Fellow of the Royal Society, and an alchemist. He was the context is sort of gentleman alchemist, gentleman occultist thing. And I'm going to mention some other people who were in this. So he was kind of late. So he died in 1809. Other folks, this is sort of coming from the 16th into the 17th century. So there's like 300 years of these gentlemen who did other things and were, high up in society and also happened to be practicing these sorts of speculative sciences, if you want to call them that. The binding is contemporary with the book. So the book was finished in March 1787, and we know that because the scribe put the date and said when it was finished. The binding is contemporary with the book, and I can tell you because I looked at the shelf, all of the other books in the collection are bound in the same way. They have the same kind of look, so they've got the parchment covers. It's parchment over board, not wooden board, but like thick cardboard with some metal, and there used to be straps to sort of hold it closed, and that's gone away. And then they have the number on the spine with this sort of red leather. Now, whether Charles Rainsford had them bound like this or they were bound later, I don't know. They stayed as a collection. So when Charles Rainsford died in 1809, he bequeathed his entire collection of books to Hugh Percy, the second Duke of Northumberland, right? So it went to the Dukes of Northumberland lived or had, I guess, Alnwick Castle in Northumberland, and the collection went to the library and it stayed there from the 2nd through the 12th Dukes of Northumberland. So from 1809 until 2014, that's where the collection was. And I keep saying collection, I think there were about 30 or 40 manuscripts. It's not an enormous collection, but it's pretty good sized. In 2014, July of 2014, it was sold at Sotheby's, and we bought it almost complete. There was one manuscript that was particularly notable. It had a lot of really nice illustrations, basically. And so that one was broken out, and it was purchased by a different collector. So we don't have that one, but we have everything else here. All right. Also, interestingly, this manuscript was written by Rainsford himself. This is in his hand. He signed it. In fact, here at the beginning, he gives us a little note which says that he copied, this is an exact copy of a book that he borrowed from a bookseller. So he paid a guinea to this bookseller to borrow the book, and he copied it out, and he claims that it's an exact copy. So we kind of know where he got it. But he himself wrote it, and this is not the only book in the collection that he wrote with his own hand. He bought what he could, and when he couldn't buy, he would copy. And it's the book that it's written in was a sort of this would have been a pre-made notebook, and in fact, most of it is blank. So the whole book that he copied only took up not quite half of the book. So there's still a lot of blank pages at the end here. All right. Here, in fact, is where he says that it's complete. So this is written 10th March, 1737. Did I say? I think no, 1787. That's right. 1787, and there's also the stamp, and there we go. So there's a little bit here. Let's go back to the front. So we start out, we've got these lovely marble papers. The book plate is the Dukes of Northumberland. So it's pretty unusual to have a book, let alone a whole collection of books that were only owned by, a handful of people over time. Here is when it was taken into, well, I'm not actually sure who numbered it. It was clearly number 588 when it was at the Alnwick Castle, 588, and then we renumbered it according to our own numbers when we came in. So this is what it looks like. So what is the content of this book? So he says it's an exact copy of this original manuscript, but the manuscript itself was a compilation of texts from other people in a variety of types, which I'll talk about in a moment. Two names that will come up are John Dee. So John Dee lived from 1527 to 1609. So he's like solidly 16th going into 17th century, about almost exactly 100 years before Charles Rainsford lived. John Dee, he was English. All of the people I'm going to mention are English. He was a mathematician, astronomer, teacher, astrologer, occultist, and alchemist. So he had a wide range of interests, and similar to the Middle Ages. In fact, the science is sort of very broad. Like, what is science is a very broad kind of thing. So he was fine having all of these things sort of under his belt. He also happened to be the court astronomer for Elizabeth I. So he was high up in society. He was a really important guy. So again, I was talking about the sort of gentleman occultist. John Dee was like solidly there. Another name that will come up is Richard Napier, who lived from 1559 to 1637, so again, about 100 years or so before Charles Rainsford. He was an astrologer and a medical practitioner. He was also a rector, so he actually had his own rectory, although apparently someone else preached for him because he was off doing other things, which I think was something that happened quite a lot when you had gentlemen who happened to take rectory positions. He was very interested in angels, so there are texts in here having to do with getting in touch with angels, and that would have been Richard Napier. In fact, he claimed to have close personal relationships with the archangel Raphael and Michael, which is kind of interesting of that. So sort of interesting time. All right, so it's Ars Artium is the title, and it's in English mostly, which is pretty neat. Not all of the manuscripts that we look at are in English. Most of them aren't. All right, so here again is a note about it being copied. So copied from an original manuscript on parchment leaves in secretary hand. So he's sort of showing us what kind of script the original manuscript was in, and it was handwritten in March 1673. So that's when the manuscript that he says he's copying was written. 1673 would have been after the death of John Dee and Napier, and maybe 20 years or so before. Oh no, 120 years before he's saying that he was writing this. So there we go. And I have put some tabs in to remind myself of some particular things, but we can just sort of have a look. It's written in, a handwritten calligraphic kind of script, and some of the words are written in red to sort of show that they're important. We have Adam, we have Jesus down here, we have God, and the Trinity. So the context it's clearly like a really Christian kind of context, and not, even though it is an occult and they're going to be talking about like conversing with spirits, they're still well within their sort of context. All right. And Christ, we're getting a lot of Latin here. In fact, it looks like this is all in Latin. Not all of the texts are listed in the table of contents, and it might be interesting to figure out what all of the different texts are and where they're from. And as far as I know, the manuscript that he copied is not known. We don't actually know what this manuscript is that he was copying. Here, I think we're seeing some alchemical notations or figures. Alchemy. I know very little about alchemy, but I know that it has a lot of examples of like little notations that are used to refer to maybe chemicals and other kinds of things. So that's something to look for as we're going through. We have saints, we have something, the Virgin, this Mother, and also by all the virtues, powers, and strengths of all the blessed saints, of whom have promised that all something things shall be given. Lots of prayers. Let's see, names of spirits, I think. Sanaya, Hamaya, and over here it looks like there's baptism, preaching, passions. I don't know. But it is interesting to me that an occult manuscript is starting out with a whole bunch of prayers. It's like, I don't know if this is what he was doing, but it's like we're gearing ourselves up. We've got to get God in us before we start trying to talk to demons. I don't know. All right. And then here is where I believe let's see, this is 39 and 40. Right. So we've gotten through the prayers, and now this section is how to prepare for a ritual. So you have to go in with the right mindset. You can't just jump into it. And I believe, let's see, you must have a chamber. I think that's free from company. Basically, you want to be by yourself. With the window towards the east. You want a room that faces east. Once every day for the space of, I'm not sure how many days, before you begin to work, you want frankincense or some other sweet odor. So you want to get your eastern facing room by yourself, frankincense. You must wholly abstain for 7 days from the company of women. Also, keep a spare diet in eating and drinking. And also, above all, you must not make yourself known in what you are going about, but keep yourself from being, I'm not sure what that is, of your enterprise. So don't let the spirits know what you're going to be doing. You have to do all of these things. Suspected, maybe it does. From being suspected, thank you. Suspected of your enterprise. So, and it goes on. So you want to make sure that you're doing these things, and yet you're being very subtle about it, I suppose. All right. So once you are ready, there's more prayers. We've got some more prayers here. And then this is invocations. So we're going to start invocations. And I have a note here because I think this is one. Yes. So an excellent, approved experience of Azcariel, who will appear on a, I think that might be something glass, anyway, crystal, stone, or barrel with a garland of saffron flowers about his head. So I won't read the whole. If you would like, you can look at if you go to the record, which I will, I'll post the link to the record again in case you missed that, because the manuscript has been digitized, and you can, if you go to the digital images, you can find the whole thing. But there's the link, and I can't guarantee that it would work. Don't forget you have to have your eastern facing room before you even start. But there you go. So this is how you would invocate for this particular spirit, and there are more and more prayers as well. Let's see. And here's the angel. So here's the angel Raphael as well. And again, I think it's not clear to me exactly who wrote all of the different texts, but maybe this is a Napier section given his interest in angels there. So this could be a really interesting project for someone actually to track down the texts and who wrote them and that. So, all right. So skipping ahead. Oh, the names of God, I think. So lots of different names. Some of them written in red and some not. Names, a little more Latin. There are a lot. Most of this is written in English, but there's a whole list of the languages in the record. Let me see. English, Latin, and French, with occasional words in Greek and Hebrew. And also the alchemical, but those were only on a few pages. All right, and it's mostly pretty easy to read for me. All All right. Huh. These are more angel names and descriptions of who they are. Angels or maybe spirits. I'm noticing a lot of these, this stamp is appearing on a lot of pages, and I don't remember seeing anything about a stamp, but let me see. Oop. Find stamp, let's see. It just says, oh, I think those are Northumberland. The record seems to think they're the Dukes of Northumberland, so those are what the stamps are, with the moon and the crown. All right. Here's some French, I think. We found the French. All right, and then here, this is the one diagram in the manuscript, and I'm not even sure what it is, but this section is, oh, where'd it go? Page 180, a list of divine names for invocations. So we'll be seeing more. Seems like there was another list earlier, so a whole list of names for invocations and the little crosses that are separating the names. Rosa, Pharos, Vision, Ado, Theos, lots of names. The great names of God. So we have another list of names of God. These 2 pages, this is apparently a list of contents, sort of the start of a list of contents. And we see this sometimes in earlier manuscripts too, where there's an attempt made to create an index, because once you have all of this, there's a lot of stuff in this manuscript. There's a lot of prayers and a lot of different sections, and so being able to know where they are would be really great. But it seems like he kind of started and listed some things and then decided it was too much work, and didn't get very far, which I sympathize with that. So that never really happened. And then there's a note here on page 191. This was finished February 2nd, 1758, I think, or 56 maybe.
Looks like a 6 to me.
Andrew says it looks like a 6, so we'll say it's 1756. So this was finished then. But then it keeps going. So even though, remember, this would have been a blank book and he would have just sort of been adding to it. So then we get to here. What is this? Anecdotes of, Dr. Napier, I believe. Richard Napier from Mr. Something miscellanies, Mr. Someone. I'm not sure what, that's someone's name, but I'm not sure whose name that is. But these are selections or notes from the personal papers of Richard Napier. So again, Richard Napier lived about 100 years before Charles Rainsford. And he was the one who was a rector, in addition to being an astrologer and a medical practitioner. And his personal papers were, on his death, were bequeathed to Elias Ashmole, who you may have heard of, was the founder of the Ashmolean Museum. And he was apparently an antiquarian. Well, I knew he was an antiquarian, but he was also an occultist, another gentleman occultist. As well, and his personal papers, that is, I think, Napier's personal papers are in the Bodleian Library now. So these are notes from his papers. Unclear to me if these notes were part of that manuscript that Charles Rainsford said he was copying, or if he was added later. I kind of think they were added later, but I'm not entirely sure. I marked this page because he's making references to things that appear earlier in the book, which makes me think that this is Charles Rainsford doing this once he's copied them. So he says down here, as in the beryl or crystal mentioned on page 52. So if we go back to page 52 in this book, here we go, page 52. This is where he was talking about Azcariel, remember, who's going to show up with yellow flowers. That's him. So he's referring back to that. There's also a reference over on this page where he's saying, given to Mr. Ashmole, see page, I think that's 30 and 56 of this manuscript. So this makes it sound like Charles Rainsford has copied this out, and now he's sitting down with Napier's papers and is making his own notes and referring to the book that he's copied, which is pretty neat. And then he has another date. So there's another maybe 10 pages after he said that he had finished copying. This is written 10th March, 1787. So now he's really and truly finished, and because there's all the rest of it is blank. But it's such a neat little manuscript, just as an example of a particular type of person living at a time and being interested in this sort of obscure things. It's not as like when I started looking into it, I was like, oh, it'd be great, creepy. It's not actually that creepy. There's too many prayers, but it's I don't know. It's very interesting example of a book, and because it's part of this whole collection. We have 30 or so other manuscripts that are in this same vein in terms of the combination of alchemy and contacting spirits and listing out names of God. And so if you all are interested, I can we can look at more of the books from this collection in the future. I'd love to do more with them, because they're a neat little historic time. So I don't know if there are any questions. You guys have been so quiet today. So I hope that this has been interesting, at least. And and that's about it. So I'm going to say goodbye and thanks for coming. And I'll see you next week for the print and manuscript. Yeah, Tara, the red ink is in that more Gothic hand. It's interesting the way he differentiates between them. All right, hope to see you again soon. Have a great week, everybody.